She screamed so loud the whole block stopped. Her house was glowing like Times Square, and she thought it was sabotage. But the real twist? She was the one who gave me the power, literally. And that wasn't even the best part. It started the week after Thanksgiving. Chestnut Lane was one of those neighborhoods where everyone pretended to like each other just enough to avoid lawsuits. The lawns were perfect, the sidewalks pressure-washed weekly, and the mailboxes all matched like it was Stepford. But for me and my daughter Emily, it was our fresh start. After the divorce, I needed quiet. I needed clean. I needed routine. And Emily needed Christmas. So I went big. Not flashy, not obnoxious, just hopeful. I wrapped the porch columns with shimmering icicle lights, hung a glowing wreath I'd built with my dad years ago, and lined the driveway with candy cane stakes that blinked in soft rhythm. Every night, when I plugged it in, Emily's eyes lit up brighter than anything on the lawn. But that was the problem. Across the street lived a woman named Dolores. Nobody called her that. Everyone called her Karen. White-collar blouse every day. Clipboard on Saturdays. Permanent scowl that could strip paint off siding. She wasn't just the HOA president. She was the reason people skipped HOA meetings. It was December 2nd when she crossed the street without saying a word. No knock. No hello. Just stood there, staring up at the lights like they'd insulted her personally. "These are not within compliance," she said flatly. I blinked. "Sorry." The lighting exceeds the lumen threshold set by the HOA exterior decoration guidelines. And the candy canes are unapproved yardsticks. I try not to laugh. They're Christmas lights. They're an eyesore, she snapped. You have 48 hours to remove them, or you'll be fined. And with that, she turned and walked away. Emily watched her from the window and whispered, "Is she the Grinch?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the lights, suddenly unsure if Joy had a permit. The next morning, there was a violation slip taped to my front door. Red ink. $200 fine. Emily had drawn a Santa in chalk on the sidewalk the night before. Karen had circled it on the notice. Graffiti, it said. I called the HOA office. No answer. I emailed. No reply. On day 3, the lights were still up. Emily begged me not to take them down. "It's what makes this place feel like home," she said. That hit harder than I expected. So I left them on. That night, Karen returned, this time with a flashlight and a measuring tape. She took photos from every angle. She measured the height of the inflatable snowman I'd added and scribbled something in her book. I opened the door. "You need help, Karen?" She didn't even look at me. "You'll be hearing from the board." She left before I could respond. 2 days later, a letter arrived. A formal order from the HOA citing decorative overexposure and visual disharmony. They were demanding immediate removal or risk escalation. Emily cried when I told her. She asked why someone would hate lights. I didn't know what to tell her. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that some people just wake up angry? That night, I sat in the garage staring at boxes of lights, wondering if it was worth it, wondering if joy had limits in a place like this. And then I saw it. A small gray utility box on the side of Karen's house, unlocked. An old external power jack, likely forgotten. My mind sparked to life. If she hated lights so much, maybe she needed to see what real lights looked like. And just like that, the idea was born. Not to be petty, not to be cruel, but to remind her, and maybe the whole street, what the season was really about. Sharing the glow, even if it meant giving her more than she could handle. I didn't act right away. The idea was there, flashing in the back of my mind like a rogue bulb on a string. But it needed finesse. Not just for revenge, but because if I was going to go through with this, I had to make sure it didn't hurt Emily or backfire on me. That weekend, Karen struck again. This time, she called an emergency HOA board meeting. I wasn't invited. Didn't even know it was happening until I saw 3 cars parked outside her house Sunday morning. One of them belonging to Greg Simmons, the HOA's treasurer and one of the least brave men I've ever met. By noon, I received a hand-delivered letter, an official resolution signed by 3 board members. It stated that my decorations violated aesthetic cohesion, that I was now being fined $500, and that failure to remove the lights by Tuesday would result in legal action. Legal action? Over Christmas lights. I sat on the porch that evening, Emily curled up next to me with her hot cocoa, completely unaware of the bureaucratic avalanche bearing down on us. She looked up and asked, "Do you think Grandpa would like it here?" I didn't answer right away. My father was a stubborn man with a laugh that could shake dust from drywall. Every December, he'd transform our old house into a North Pole replica. He wired custom light displays, built animatronic reindeer from scrap motors, and once tried to build a sleigh out of lawnmowers. He passed away 2 years ago. I inherited the lights and his belief that joy was meant to be shared. Emily waited for my reply, eyes full of hope. "He'd love it," I finally said. "But he'd be building something big in that garage right now." That night, after I tucked her in, I opened the garage and pulled down the old bins from the rafters. I wasn't thinking small anymore. I called my old friend Darren, who now worked in smart home tech. I explained my situation without naming names. He laughed for a full minute, then said, "I'm in." We spent the next 2 evenings mapping the plan. My decorations were already powered through a smart relay system Darren had helped me install last year. The magic was in the rerouting. If I could switch the power source and redirect the lights to a new circuit, I could technically plug them into any standard outlet, including Karen's unused external power jack. She probably hadn't even noticed it, tucked behind her hedge, barely rusted, and left over from a time when people actually strung lights with joy in this neighborhood. We scoped it early one morning before sunrise. I wore black. Darren called it Operation Mistletoe. I called it Justice. The key would be stealth. I couldn't just drape cords across the street. But Darren had a solution: wireless remote control units with disguised relays. We could hide a power transmitter near her house, discreetly route it through that forgotten outlet, and use my smart hub to sync the whole thing. That night, Emily fell asleep watching videos of holiday parades. I stood over her for a long while, then whispered a promise: "No one's stealing our Christmas this year." I started the wiring just before dawn. I kept to the shadows. No footsteps on our property, no cords in sight. Everything was routed with precision. When it was done, I tucked the final connection into the mulch by her hedge and walked back across the street, heartbeat echoing in my ears. Now all I had to do was wait. The next morning, Karen was on her porch again, arms crossed, glaring at my house. The lights were off. I kept them off intentionally. She smirked. But that night, she'd be glowing. I waited until just after sunset. The neighborhood was wrapped in that cold blue haze, where the sky hasn't fully gone dark, but all the porch lights are already on. Emily stood at the window, confused. "Are we not doing lights tonight?" she asked, holding her favorite mug. "Tonight," I said, "we're trying something new." Across the street, Karen's house sat in shadow. Just how she liked it. No wreath, no candles, no joy. Just that one hedge-lined front yard hiding a secret no HOA clause could cover. I tapped my phone. For a second, nothing happened. Then, her gutters exploded with light. Not literally, but close. A full strand of synchronized LED icicles snapped to life, running in rhythmic pulses from end to end. The bushes, wrapped in hidden mesh netting, blazed in deep greens and reds. The garage lit up with a glowing snowflake projection. And then came the grand finale: 12-foot inflatable reindeer on her front lawn rising slowly, lit from inside like parade floats. Across the street, Emily gasped, "Is that Mrs. Karen's house?" The best part? The lights weren't just glowing, they were moving. Darren had set them to a custom audio track that pulsed light to beat. Even from across the street, we could hear the faint jingle of bells and soft thumping of drums. Within minutes, people began to notice. The Harris kids from down the block ran over, mouths open. A woman walking her dog stopped and stared. A car slowed to a crawl in front of her driveway. Then another. By the time the second verse of the music kicked in, there were over a dozen neighbors standing outside watching. Phones came out. Videos began rolling. A woman shouted, "Karen, you went all out this year." And that's when the front door burst open. Karen stumbled out in slippers, hair up in curlers, eyes squinting against the rainbow blaze. For a moment, she just stood there, bewildered. Then she saw the crowd. And then she screamed. Not a word. Just a primal, furious screech as she stomped onto the lawn and began yanking at wires. "This isn't me. These aren't mine. Turn them off." Someone from the crowd laughed. "Come on, Karen, own it." This is the most festive you've ever been. I didn't do this, she shouted, veins rising in her neck. It's sabotage. Vandalism. Emily clung to my side. Is she okay? I held her close. She's just surprised. One of the neighbors tried to calm Karen, but she was already storming toward the bushes, ripping light nets like they were weeds. A blow-up penguin toppled sideways as she tripped over a candy cane stake and nearly face-planted in the mulch. That's when the local news van pulled up. I hadn't expected that. Apparently, someone had posted a video on a community board. HOA Scrooge decorates big. It already had hundreds of shares. The reporter stepped out, mic in hand, and began filming Karen mid-meltdown. "You're all laughing at me," she screamed, pointing wildly. "I'll call the police. I'll sue everyone. This is an attack." Then she stopped. Her eyes locked on the power cord trailing from her bushes, across her yard, down the sidewalk, and across the street, right to the corner of my lawn. She followed it slowly, like a horror movie villain, 1 foot at a time. Her face was redder than Rudolph's nose. I stayed still. When she reached the property line, she raised her eyes and stared at me. Not confusion. Not fury. Shock. I smiled and waved. The neighbors hadn't noticed the cord yet. The news crew was still rolling. Karen looked back and forth, realizing the entire street had witnessed her outburst and that she couldn't explain it without revealing what I'd done. She turned slowly, walked back to her house like a ghost, and slammed the door. The lights kept going. Emily tugged my sleeve. "Did you do that?" I winked. The lights just wanted to be seen. The crowd clapped. Someone started singing. And for the first time since we moved to Chestnut Lane, it felt like Christmas. But Karen wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The lights on Karen's house kept shining through the night. Even after she slammed the door, even after she tried cutting power from the inside, nothing worked. Darren had wired the connection flawlessly. The override relay fed from my smart hub and looped through a battery backup module. Her only option was to physically rip out the connection, and that would have meant walking into her own hedge during a neighborhood Christmas carol. So she waited. And at exactly 8:17 the next morning, 2 patrol cars pulled up in front of my house. Emily peeked out the window. "Why are the police here?" I stepped onto the porch before they rang the bell. Karen was standing across the street in full white blouse and heels, arms crossed like she was about to testify before Congress. One officer approached. "Are you Nick Halter?" "Yes, sir. Your neighbor filed a vandalism and trespassing complaint. She claims you wired your holiday lights through her property without consent." I didn't blink. "Is there a law against sharing holiday cheer?" The younger officer chuckled. The older one didn't. Karen stormed over, voice shrill. "Don't let him joke his way out of this. This is sabotage. This is psychological warfare." "Ma'am," the officer said calmly, "we're just gathering facts." I nodded. "Would you like to see the footage?" "Footage," Karen repeated, eyes narrowing. I pulled out my phone. I've got security cameras facing both directions. Full view of my lawn, sidewalk, and everything leading to her yard. You'll see I never crossed her property line. The officer raised a brow. "Can we review it?" Of course. 5 minutes later, we were inside, watching the footage. Karen's jaw clenched tighter with every second. The video clearly showed me staying on my side, tucking the transmitter near the curb, never stepping onto her lawn once. "You see," I said calmly, "I never entered her property. The power box she's using, it's publicly accessible. No locks, no barriers, no signs." The younger officer scratched his head. "And those decorations?" "Mine," I said. "Battery-backed and wirelessly synced. I've got receipts. Would you like to see the remote app controls, too?" Karen was practically vibrating. "This isn't about rules. It's about malicious intent. He did this to humiliate me." The older officer finally turned to her. "Ma'am, unless there's proof of trespassing or property damage, this isn't a criminal matter. We'd suggest handling this through the HOA." Karen's eyes darkened. "Oh, I intend to." The officers left without issuing a citation. I offered them hot cocoa. They declined, but not without a smile. That afternoon, Karen summoned another emergency HOA meeting. Except this time, the neighborhood showed up. The woman with a dog. The Harris kids' parents. Greg Simmons, who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. Even the old couple who never spoke to anyone was there, sitting with hot cider and lawn chairs like they were ready for a show. Karen stood at the center of her driveway with a megaphone. "This is a direct violation of HOA decorum. He's made a mockery of our standards." Someone from the crowd shouted, "Looks better than your house ever did." Laughter rippled. Karen turned red. "These lights are a violation of Section 4, Subarticle 6. Greg raised his hand timidly. "Actually, Karen, we reviewed that section, and there's no clause about lighting on someone else's house, especially if it's powered from their own box." She blinked. "What?" He cleared his throat. Technically, he didn't break any rules. The crowd murmured in agreement. Karen began to shake. "I am the HOA president. I decide what's appropriate." Another neighbor chimed in. "That's not how this works." And just like that, the tide turned. A quiet chant began. It started with one kid, then another. Soon it spread like wildfire. "Glow it up. Glow it up. Glow it up." Karen turned and stormed back inside her house as the lights on her lawn blazed even brighter, synchronized perfectly to Mariah Carey's Christmas anthem. I looked down at Emily, who beamed up at me. "You gave her the best lights on the block." I smiled. All I ever wanted was to share the season, but Karen wasn't ready to surrender. She had one move left, and it was her boldest yet. The lights kept glowing every night, and every night Karen's curtains stayed drawn tighter than ever. But I could feel her watching. Her house had become the most visited on Chestnut Lane, not because of her, but because of what we'd made it. Kids posed for pictures. Cars lined the street. One couple even proposed under her front arch of synchronized reindeer. They'll never shut it down. Turns out, her own board had grown tired of her tactics. Greg and two others submitted a petition to hold a special vote. Karen's presidency was on thin ice. Still, I expected her to retaliate. I didn't expect how far she'd go. It happened on a Thursday evening. I was walking Emily back from school when we saw them. Two utility trucks parked in front of her house. No logos. No markings. Just workers in plain reflective vests rolling up cords and pulling stakes from the lawn. Emily froze. "They're taking the lights down." I rushed across the street. "Excuse me. Who gave you permission to remove that equipment?" One of the men looked at a clipboard. "We've got an order from the property owner." "That's not her equipment." "That's mine. And it's powered from my side." He shrugged. "We don't handle disputes. We just do the pickup." I turned and saw Karen on her porch, arms folded, smirking. Emily was crushed. "Are they going to break them?" I walked up the lawn. "You had no right." Karen tilted her head. "They were making my home a circus. I'm restoring dignity. These lights brought people together. They brought embarrassment. To me. And to this neighborhood." Behind us, a crowd began forming again. But this time, it wasn't applause, it was outrage. "You ruined Christmas for the kids," one woman yelled. "This was the best our street ever looked," said another. Karen turned her back, went inside, and slammed the door. I stood there, fists clenched, watching as strangers ripped out the final glowing strand. It felt like defeat. That night, the block was dark. No lights, no music, no smiles. Emily sat on the couch, quietly drawing with her crayons. I couldn't bring myself to decorate again. Not yet, until a knock came at the door. Greg was standing there with a binder. She overstepped. Again. And this time it's done. He handed me the petition. Unanimous. The board removed her. She's no longer HOA president. I blinked. That's real. He nodded. Effective immediately. I didn't cheer. I didn't laugh. I just breathed. The next day, the neighborhood did something I'll never forget. Dozens of families gathered on our lawn. Silent at first. Then one kid plugged in a single strand of lights. Another hung a wreath on our mailbox. Someone brought hot cocoa. And then, one by one, houses all around us began lighting up again. Only this time, every decoration was made to match Karen's original display. Her exact color palette. Her same blinking reindeer. Her signature white stars, copied and spread across the block like a sea of glowing rebellion. Karen looked out from her window that night. Her jaw dropped. She had erased her own display, only for the neighborhood to turn her into the centerpiece of it all. Emily ran up beside me. Are we going to turn ours on? I nodded. Yeah, kiddo. Let's finish what we started. We plugged in the master line, and every light on every house synced to the same beat. The block pulsed in unison, soft, slow, and steady. A warm, glowing heartbeat of a community finally coming together not in rules, but in joy. Karen never came outside again that season. But she watched. We all knew she did. And maybe, just maybe, she felt a little of the magic she tried so hard to destroy. That night, Emily handed me her drawing. It was a picture of our house, glowing with light, surrounded by people. And in the corner, a little white-haired woman in a window, smiling. I didn't ask her why she drew that. I just held her close. Because sometimes, the brightest lights come from the people who once stood in your shadow.